Friends, welcome. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you. My name's Tami Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it's my joy to be the sound of your host today for this Inner MBA webinar, Lead Yourself First, Emotional Intelligence for How We Show Up, Respond, and Connect. I'm here with Kia Afcari. He's part of the core faculty of Sounds True's Inner MBA program, and he's the director of Greater Good Workplaces at the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. Let me tell you just a little bit more about Kia, what we're going to be covering today, and then we're going to get right at it. Kia has spent more than 20 years helping organizations change, everyone from biotech companies to UN agencies, and his methods are not what you might expect from someone who's so steeped in the research. I hear he's been known to use instant dance parties when needed. Let's see what happens during our webinar. Anything could happen. Okay, what are we going to be exploring? First, we're going to look at what kind of leaders do we actually want to be, and what does the science tell us about what works in organizations? Then we're going to hear from Kia about the 4 skills of emotional intelligence. And this is a part I really love. He's going to be offering us a capacity building practice for each one of the 4 domains of emotional intelligence. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about the Inner MBA, which has been newly recreated in consultation with the Greater Good Science Center. The opening event is at the International House in Berkeley on October 23rd. That opening event will also be live streamed. It's a 6-month immersion learning program. After the opening event, it will all be online. We have participants joining us from all around the world. You can learn more at innermba.soundstrue.com. And we're also going to weave in your questions. We've already received quite a few good questions. If you have additional questions as we proceed over the next hour, please write them into the chat and we'll try to incorporate as many as we can. Kia? All right, let's get at it.
Sounds good. Great to meet you. Great to see you, Tammy. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Very good. So here at the beginning, this question of what the research tells us about the type of leaders that really help organizations thrive. I think sometimes people have this idea, either I'm going to be effective and decisive and distant, or I'm going to be connected and compassionate, as if there's an either or going on. But it seems like the research actually says something quite different.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question because there's so much written on leadership and tons of books about it. And when you ask people to describe a great leader, oftentimes they use words like, they're visionary or they're decisive or they're charismatic. But when you ask them a slightly different question, which is what type of leader do you want leading you? They end up really talking about more sort of communal sort of values. So these researchers, Rebecca Ponce de Leon of Columbia Business School and Erica Bailey from Haas School of Business here at Berkeley, they really looked at the types of leaders that we want. And they asked them, how would you describe your ideal leader? And, it really fell into these 2 categories. One, which is thought of as, you know, having these charismatic and decisive elements. And then there are these other communal traits like compassion, trustworthiness, and understanding. And it turns out that people really preferred those kinds of qualities in a leader. So what we typically think of leadership being all about being charismatic and decisive, actually, it turns out we want a much more compassionate leader leading us. And so when asked to choose, they generally chose these compassionate traits, but it turns out that the most powerful combination was having both. Having the decisiveness and charismatic nature, having that vision, but really pairing that with compassion and understanding. So I think we really want leaders that are understanding and compassionate with us. And so another question we had was, well, which leaders are more successful? And we actually found a group of researchers, Wei Lizhe and Mei Feng, who really looked at CEOs, and they researched 3,500 CEOs from publicly traded companies. And their key question was, do the kind leaders or the pro-social leaders, do they do better in terms of profits? And they looked at these 3,500 CEOs and they really assessed, okay, which of these CEOs were kind? And it turns out that it's difficult to do that, to figure out which ones are kind. But one way they looked at it was, do they give their time and money to nonprofits? Do they serve on boards and things like that? And then they looked at their earnings calls. They asked, they looked at when the company is doing well, do they credit themselves or do they give the credit to their team? And when the company is doing poorly, do they take the blame or do they throw their team under the bus? And so that was another way they measured. And it turns out that those pro-social or kind leaders were actually more profitable than the other leaders that they studied. So it turns out it's not just good for your people, but it's actually good for the organization's success to have leaders that are compassionate, kind, pro-social.
Yeah, where do you think we get this idea? Because I've heard it reflected to me several times from people in the Inner MBA that there's this either or sense that that's how it is. Like either you're going to be very empathetic or you're going to be, successful, results oriented. And it's not a both and. How come that's so common, something that we've ingested and taken on?
I think it's really what we see in the media. We hear these stories of these great leaders who do amazing things and are visionary, but are not necessarily caring about their people. And while that might take you some distance, because there are sort of unkind leaders that do succeed, like we're not going to deny that, but it does not have to be an either or. And it turns out that we need both sets of skills. We need someone that is decisive and visionary, but we also need someone that cares about us and thinks about us. I mean, empathy is a great business strategy, right? If you empathize with your customers, you're much more likely to be able to produce things that people want. So I think both are really important.
Okay, one more question before we get into the four domains of emotional intelligence and a
Yeah.
practice for each, which is I think some of us have this internalized aspiration to be the kind of leader who embodies both and. I'm very empathetic and I'm decisive and I do the hard things that need to get done and I do them both. Why is it so hard? Why is that gap so hard?
I mean, I think part of it is that we're not often taught the skills of emotional intelligence. When we go to our, MBA programs, they often teach, the strategic thinking, but they're not teaching the human social skills that are really important to making things work. And it's just, we are human beings at work. AI has not taken over all of our human capital here. And so great leaders understand that they need to work with the people because ultimately you got to get things done through other people. And so if you understand those people are able to empathize with them, you'll get a lot more done.
All right, let's get into it. The four domains.
Well, this really comes from Daniel Goldman's work, who really helped popularize this idea of emotional intelligence. And it's pretty simple if you think about it. I think about it in these four quadrants. And on one side are the things related to the self. So emotional intelligence or EQ starts with self-awareness, just knowing how am I feeling? What's going on in my brain? It's sort of a metacognition to be able to look at yourself and see like, oh wow, I'm actually really annoyed right now, or I'm really nervous, or I'm really whatever it is. So self-awareness is that first domain. The second domain is now that you're aware of the self, how can you manage your own emotions? Can you manage your own actions? Right? Even though you're angry, can you take a breath before, saying something negative to the next person around you? Can you wait a moment before you write that email? So self-management is the second domain of emotional intelligence. So that's the self side. And the other side is sort of the relationship side. The third aspect or domain is social awareness. Can you pick up what's happening in the room? Can you read the room and see who's feeling well, who's not feeling well, what people may want? It's really based in empathy. Can you understand what people are going through? So social awareness is the third domain. And then the last domain is relationship management. Now that you're aware of sort of the dynamics that are happening in the room, can you manage those relationships well? Can you apologize? Can you rebuild relationships? Can you maintain relationships? Can you appreciate people so that you build that social glue that makes things happen?
Very good. Uh, let's move into, I don't think it's time for a dance party yet, but we'll see how things evolve. But let's move into self-awareness and a way we can appreciate this capacity right now and grow it in ourselves.
Yeah. So self-awareness is really about moment to moment awareness, right? So let's say you're in a meeting, could be in person or on Zoom, and can you have some awareness of what's going on for you and recenter? I had an experience where, I had been out of work for some time. I got this great job, and I remember it was my first day on the job, and I was meeting with my boss and my boss's boss and like five other people. It's the first day on the job. And I remember my boss's boss was just went off on all these things and basically saying, Kia, you got to handle this. This other team is not doing well. And I remember in that moment, I was able to just take a step back and think, okay, what's my body posture right now? Am I coming off as nervous? Can I take a moment? Can I take a breath? And everything started to slow down a little bit. And I was able to say, okay, I'm going to sit up straight. I'm going to lean back a little bit. I'm going to listen. And I was able to actually, kind of finish her work, her sentences, be very clear with her, make connections, and really assess everything that was going on in the room. So there was a bit of a mindfulness moment there where I was able to be self-aware. So one strategy you can use in a meeting is like a body scan. Something you can even do right now in this webinar is to just take a moment to see how you're feeling now and scan, from the top of your head all the way down. Notice where you might be, tight in the shoulders. And just that little bit of self-awareness can get you in touch with your feelings. You might realize that maybe you're not nervous, but you're just excited, right? To get clear on the feelings that you're having and put a name to them. So again, a body scan is one simple, easy way that you can do it, and people won't even know that you're doing it.
Can you lead us through that right now? Like a version of a 1 to 2 minute body scan that we could then be doing if we want at any point in a meeting, even as we listen here and be more present and self-aware to our responses as you're talking.
Sure, sure. Yeah, let's take a moment now. You can just, get comfortable in your seat. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes and just take a moment to ground yourself, knowing that in this moment, you are here. And we can start with just a deep breath with two short breaths in and one long breath out. Breathing in again, and breathing out. And then really just starting with seeing if you can feel the hairs on the top of your head, scanning down to your forehead, your eyebrows, your eyelids, scanning down the bridge of your nose, down through your face, releasing, just noticing your neck and letting your shoulders go, noticing there's any tension there in the shoulders, releasing that scanning down through your arms, down through your torso, scanning down, releasing any tension that you have, and down through your legs, thighs, your knees, your calves, all the way down to your toes. And again, you can do that even in the course of a meeting as your people are getting settled. Just a nice way to quickly reset and get yourself present in the room.
I'm curious, Kia, if you have any quote unquote somatic cues or body awareness cues that you use. For example, one person shared with me seat and feet. If you can feel your seat and your feet and the heaviness and the point of contact in both of those, that can be an immediate kind of quick, like almost like a quick start to body awareness. I'm wondering if there's anything like that that you go to.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, for me, since a lot of the body scans start at the top of the head, it's for me trying to feel the air or the breeze at the top of my head. And that's a way for me to just start to feel grounded.
And then the other thing I'm curious about, because of course, I think in this self-awareness and leading ourselves, it's the idea that we're not going to always be reactive before we have a chance to pause and consider. How do you track in a body way that intensity is rising and you're about to blurt something out that you're going to wish you didn't blurt out? Like, do you have what is your own sort of inner tracking of that?
I think really paying attention to your breath, noticing when you're holding your breath, often can mean that you're sort of under anxiousness or stress. And it can be as simple as just taking a deep breath before you speak. I often use cues like, like that's really interesting, or let me hear more about that, because one of the ways to get out of anxiety, for me at least, is to get curious. So let's say somebody says something that really, sets you off. Instead of, reacting, you can just take a moment to get curious. Huh? Say more about what you mean by that. I'd love to hear more about what you're saying. And that sort of takes the focus off of your own anxiety or worries and more on learning. So that's one strategy I use.
Let's move directly from self-awareness into self-management, since that's really where it naturally goes here and our conversation has taken us.
Yeah, so in terms of self-management, a simple practice you can use is boxed breathing. And if you can imagine, your breath is like a four sides of a box, and really spending 4 seconds at each stage. So the first is breathing in for 4 seconds and then holding for 4 seconds, then breathing out for 4 seconds and then holding for 4 seconds. So that boxed breathing is again something you can do if you are feeling yourself, getting anxious or angry or whatever it is. You can use that box breathing in the moment to just bring yourself back to some stability.
Again, can you lead us through a couple rounds in real time? I think it's really helpful for people and
Sure,
for me to do it with you, because then we really get the sense and it's a new tool we have available to us.
sure. Yeah, let's do that. So let's even do this with our eyes open, which is something you might do in the sense in the middle of a meeting. So let's say something comes up and you feel yourself getting, worked up. You can just start with 4 seconds in. So breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4. Releasing for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then holding for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go back to breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, holding for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4. breathing out for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, and holding for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just a basic practice of box breathing that you can do at any time.
Do you really feel like you can do this kind of thing with other people in the room and people don't think like, what's going on with Kia? I think he might have XYZ, like something's happening with the guy over there. He's holding his breath out for.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not like when I'm on stage or when I'm supposed to be speaking. It's usually maybe at the beginning of a meeting where things are getting set up and the agenda is getting talked about, or someone else is talking. You can do it pretty quietly without anyone really knowing what's happening. So yeah, you have to choose your moments. But again, I like some of the shortcuts that you mentioned, like seat and feet, that you can do really even in a shorter amount of time.
And then in this arena of managing ourselves and our reactivity, somebody wrote in, what about I'm in a situation and a quick response is required, and yet I know I'm in a triggered state of some kind.
Yeah. I think when a quick response is required, the best that you can do, is really to take that deep breath. And to, one of the things that I do, oftentimes we speed up when we're under stress, is to actually slow down and mean every word, right? So there's a way that it gives you time and space to recenter yourself. You take that deep breath. You can go to curiosity before you answer. Gives you time to really formulate your thoughts. And then when you do speak, resist the urge to like blast through everything and try to mean every word. So that's something that I do in the moment.
Somebody wrote in relationship to the body scan that they weren't able to track all the different parts of the body. And even as we describe a shortcut like seat and feet, for some people, they're like, that's not obvious to me. I don't connect to my seat and feet. Maybe they haven't done a lot of meditative practice or other kinds of embodied practices. And how else can people grow in this self-awareness capacity and learning to manage their activity if the body channel isn't natural for them for whatever reason, or they haven't had a lot of training in it?
Yeah. Well, I think it really is just practice. It takes time. I remember when I first started, like I would start a body scan and then my mind would go to, what I have to do tomorrow and I would lose it. So it really does take some practice. But I think some shortcuts can be just focusing on the breath, if you're not able to access the body scan. I do think the more that you do it, the more clear you get. I mean, there are some people who have been doing it for so many years, they're actually scanning at the level of, 1 centimeter of their forehead, and then the next centimeter, like they're going at that slow of a pace. So it's just something I think it takes practice.
Yeah, I would add in too, I'm curious what you think about this, which is a lot of times people learn these practices in the 60-second version or the 3-minute version. And one of the things I found is if you do the practices on your own in a longer way or in a training session, like some of the sessions we'll have in the Inner MBA, then you're better able to practice them on the spot when you need them. It's like you
Yeah,
have a resource because,
absolutely.
whereas if people just hear the kind of quote unquote hack version, and
Yeah,
I mean, hack meaning like shortcut version, like you hear the on the spot version, but you don't have any of that bank of training, it's harder.
absolutely. Yeah. It's just like you work the groove, and the more you do it, the more you fall into that groove. So absolutely, it becomes easier to access. And that's, people who do meditation realize the important part of meditation is not just your time on the cushion, right? It's how to bring it into your life. And so if you do it in longer spurts, like you're talking about, you're more able to access it in the moment because your brain has already gone down that path several times, and then you're able to really go there again.
And then someone else wrote in, What about if I like starting from my feet and going up to my head? What do you think about that?
Totally. Whatever works for you to get back in the zone. Absolutely. Can start with your feet or the other way around.
Okay, let's move to our third domain, social awareness.
So this is just a very simple practice, social awareness. And again, this is something that you do when you're able, it's something that the more that you do, the more you're able to actually go there. Social awareness is really about reading the room. And so one of the things that I do in every meeting that I go on, it's just become a habit, is I will just scan the room, go from face to face and just notice what I'm noticing. How does this person seem? How are they coming into this meeting? And one of the things I might do before a meeting is to just sort of build a map of what the people in the room might want out of this meeting. I was trained by this guy named Augusto Boal. He was a theater practitioner. And one of the things he said really stuck with me. He said, desire is the battery of the human ego. Because he was trying to instruct us how to act from a place of desire. What does each character want? And that is what is propelling them. And so before a meeting, I might think about, okay, what might this person want from this meeting? What might this person need? So it's a place of empathy, trying to put yourself in their shoes to think about what they might need. And you'll find that not only are you better able to connect with them, but you're also better able to get things done because you are more clear about what they might want. So again, scanning the room is really the practice. And if you want to go to level two, it's before you even get in the room, think about what people might want out of this meeting or this session.
So let me ask you a question. When you say that before a meeting or a group, you'll make a map, what do you mean by a map? Are you just listing down the what you perceive as potential unmet needs? Is it just a list or is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll actually draw little stick figures of each person and with thought bubbles coming out saying, okay, I want probably this. And again, you're making some assumptions, so you got to check your assumptions. But um, I will actually make a list or a drawing of the people who are going to be in the meeting and think about what they might be concerned about based on what I know about them. So that's what I mean by a map.
Interestingly, one of the CEOs, and actually two of them, emphasized this point that as this is in previous cohorts of the Inner MBA, that this quality of empathizing with people's unmet needs is one of the best traits that an entrepreneur can have,
Hmm.
because that's how you sense what the demand wave is that is coming for a new product, or like what are people's desires, to use your language, what
Yeah,
unmet needs do my customers have, does my community have, and how can we solve for them?
absolutely. Absolutely, super important. And I'll tell you a little story around this, not just your customers, but the people who you work with. So I had this crazy job where I was trying to change the culture of a huge educational, a university, 10,000 staff, big university. And the year before, Bain and Company, the consulting company, had come and found like $150 million of waste. And they said, here, there's all these ways you can sort of save dollars, but really, if you don't change the culture, things are going to go back to the way things were. So I was looking at the administrative culture, all the staff, and there was one team of about 200 people that was really, really unpopular. Nobody really wanted the change. And they said, Kia, you need to go and fix the culture of that team. These 200 people, this leader needs some help with the culture. Um, and then I talked to some people about it, and they're like, Kia, good luck with that. There's just no way you're going to be able to get to this woman. In fact, they called her the Ice Queen. Like she had no, warmth or compassion. She's not going to be into this warm and fuzzy culture stuff. And so what I did before I met with her, it's like the meeting was in a week. I just spent the week just what I call doing empathic imagining, which is really to think about what it's like to be in her shoes. And I realized she kind of had the worst job on campus. Like she was doing this big change that nobody really wanted. And I imagined how hard that was. So when I went in to meet with her, that's the first thing I said to her. I was like, man, it must be really tough to be in your shoes and doing this big project and not getting any really appreciation for it. And in that moment, she just broke down and started to tell me about how hard it was. And um, before you know it, she's like showing me pictures of her kids. And, this is the ice queen, supposedly, but really connecting. And by the time we got into it, she said, okay, what's this culture stuff you want to do? Like, let's go. Like I had immediately been able to build some trust with her because I had done this kind of social awareness of understanding what her needs might be, what her concerns were, and just with a little bit of empathy, I was able to build trust, and she was ready to move on what I wanted to do. So, again, I think that's really important in the workplace is to figure out what the people around you may want and need.
This question came in from a listener. I read the room almost too well. I pick up on everything and
Yeah,
I carry it home with me.
yeah,
Is there such a thing as too much social awareness?
I think so. I think, to be so hyper aware of others' needs and wants, not every need and want needs to be addressed. So that goes back to really self-management is what is in my control and what is not. How do I want to act in this moment? So yeah, I think you can take any one of these skills too far. Um, and being too dialed in and trying to be a pleaser to everyone in the room, it also may not go well. So it's sort of knowing enough to be able to help move things forward. But to not take it so far that it's incapacitating. I think that has a double-edged sword to that.
Let's move to relationship management, the fourth domain of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, so this is the area where you're beyond just being aware of what's happening in the room, you're able to actually build connections with folks. And I think the most proactive way to do that, I think, is through appreciation and gratitude. And so one of the skills that we teach when we work with organizations is this practice called the appreciation go round. And I remember in this culture change project, we decided to test this out with a team. And it's very simple practice. All you do is in a meeting, it could be on Zoom or in person, you appreciate the person to your left. And then they appreciate the person to their left. And you sort of go around the room until everyone gets appreciated. Very simple, right? And we did it with this team. And I remember we got to the third person and she got appreciated. And then she just broke down into tears. And she said, wow, I've been working here for 9 years and I've never felt appreciated. And I didn't even know you guys liked me. So it was such a difficult moment, but also such a simple practice that can really change the tenor of any meeting. And so this is a practice that we really spread through organizations. It's just start your meeting the first 5, 10 minutes with an appreciation go around, and people share how they feel about others, and before you know it, we're just a much more collaborative group. We're kind of build that social glue that helps us get things done more efficiently.
What would you say to someone who says, look, I'm into this appreciation thing, but I got a lot that I need to handle in this, 29-minute meeting, and we don't have time for 5 minutes of an appreciation round at the
Yeah,
beginning or end. And it's kind of interrupting the got to get this done energy.
yeah, yeah. Well, I found that a lot of meetings don't go well because there's a lot of mistrust and a lot of tensions in the room. And you'll find that that 5 minutes will make the rest of the 25 minutes go much more smoothly. Because again, we have set the notion that we're in this together and we want to make it work. And so now that we've set that, we spend 5 minutes just building that relationship. The rest of the 25 minutes, people are more engaged in making it work to get things done. So I find that while it might take a little more time on the front end, on the back end, things move much more smoothly.
And I know it's can be difficult to ask someone for scientific research data on the fly here, but is there any, when it comes to appreciation in the workplace, are there studies that show a difference in terms of outcomes for organizations?
Absolutely. There's a lot of practices around appreciation, a lot of studies on gratitude and appreciation in workplaces. And I think they found that it works really at so many levels, at the team level, at the organizational level. A piece of work by Cortini and Galanti in 2019, they wrote this study on gratitude at work, and it was basically with surveys and a 10-day diary study, finding that employees who experienced more gratitude at work were more satisfied and their performance, their actual work performance really improved. So there's a lot of studies on gratitude in general and in the workplace as well, showing a connection to performance beyond just engagement. Of course, we all want employees to be engaged, but it also leads to performance gains as well.
We had a listener write in, what do you do when you reacted at a certain time in a way that you now regret?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, the fact that you are noticing that shows the first domain around self-awareness. Like you were able to notice that you didn't show up like you would wanted to. And so that's awesome. You're already doing sort of the first domain of emotional intelligence. What you're talking about is really relationship management, the fourth domain. And a lot of that comes through relationship repair. Can you circle back with the person? And oftentimes you'll find that they're maybe not as concerned about it as you are. But the fact that you were able to circle back with them and say, hey, Tammy, I just want to note that maybe in our last meeting I came off a little bit strong, and I just want to make sure you're okay and know this is nothing personal about you. To really be able to apologize in a real way. Actually, on our website, we have a method for an effective apology. Um, to be able to do that is really important. And sometimes you'll find like, oh, I didn't take anything by it. Don't worry about it. But just the fact that you were able to circle back to that person really builds that kind of relationship bond that is so important.
Can you summarize for me what the most important principles are of an effective apology?
See if I can remember all of them, but I think the first is to acknowledge the 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 actual thing that went down. So what actually happened, acknowledging your path and what happened in the situation, asking about how you can like make it right, and then making a commitment to actually not not repeat that kind of behavior in the future. And so there's sort of these parts to it that are really important, and hitting all of those parts are really important to an effective apology.
Kia, I want to ask you a slightly different side of this apology question. What
Mhm.
I've noticed, and I was the CEO of Sounds True for 40 years until recently passing that baton, is that I said things that I wished I hadn't, interrupted, was rude, all kinds of things, and it was very natural. I really wanted to apologize when I would reflect and do it. I really wanted to do that.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that's come easily to me. But I have a couple of follow-up questions here. The part that's been hard is actually changing the behavior so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Like in my case, kind of cutting people off and dominating. That would have been
Yep.
the thing that later I'd be like, God, Tammy, can't you just make space for other people? Why do you
Hmm.
come in so heavy and hot all the time? And I would
Hmm.
talk to myself and I'd watch my body, but then before you know it, I'd be in another meeting dominating in a
Yeah.
way that shut other people down, even though that wasn't what I wanted. So I'd like to just hear a little bit more about what you have to say about ongoing behavior change. You've made the
Yeah.
apology, but you keep repeating it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very real for a lot of people. I mean, we develop these patterns. I think I do the same in a situation that's kind of high stakes. I often want to take over. And I think the challenge is first the fact that you're noticing it is important. So how do you notice it in the moment? Sometimes I will actually literally put a sticky note for an important meeting and remind myself of that tendency. And again, the more that you get back into these self-awareness practices, whether it's a body scan or some other breathing exercise, you're able to be more in the moment and notice what's happening. Um, I mentioned my first day on the job in that one meeting, and when I was more grounded and mindful, I could see that not only was I kind of nervous in the meeting, but I noticed that the woman to my left, her face was turning red because she was basically being thrown under the bus. Right. So the more grounded you get, the more you're able to pick up the cues of what's happening around you, how people are reacting to you, taking over or dominating a meeting. So I think giving yourself some reminders, getting that self-awareness in the meeting itself, can help.
Okay, and then the other question about apology is it's one thing to ask someone, I'm sorry, here's what happened, and this is something I'm working on. Will you forgive me? Okay,
Yeah.
that side. But when someone has really wronged you and
Hmm.
maybe blown up at you, and it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
and then they apologize, what
Yeah.
I've noticed is it's been a journey for me to really fully accept and release that person. Like there's a
Yeah.
part of me that says, okay, I don't trust you in the same
Yeah.
way, even though you apologized. Like,
Yeah.
no, this thing happened and I'm always going to be watching it. And, like I can hold a grudge, basically, is
Hmm.
my question is about how do we release our grudges when people apologize to us?
Yeah. This is a deep one, and we've got some articles on this in the Greater Good website about letting go of grudges. I mean, I have a friend who teaches emotional intelligence. It's a big part of what he does, DB Bedford, and he talks about the fact that holding a grudge is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die, right? There's a way in which the grudge is actually more affecting you than it is the other person. And just to note that it's a process, that it takes time, that people you aren't necessarily going to flip around and be like, okay, we're all cool now. It's self-protective, right? If you've been burned before, you're not going to quickly jump back in the fire. So I think first is to give yourself some time and space, and to know that in the long run, that grudge is actually more affecting you than it is them. They may have totally moved on, but you're still holding on to this thing, which is ultimately affecting you. So it's a tough one, but I do think that it takes time, and there are some real benefits for yourself in letting go of that grudge.
We have someone writing in, I sometimes experience two kinds of regrets in meetings, saying what I said or the way that I said it, but also not saying what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
How would you address that, Kia?
Well, I think it's really important in building the kind of cultures that we want. I actually had an experience working in an organization where a lot of women were getting treated poorly. Essentially, their ideas were being taken, they were being interrupted in meetings. And so we developed this sort of theater practice because there's a lot of research showing that the what we call bullying behavior, the best way to address bullying behavior is to speak up, is to be the bystander that's no longer a bystander, but it's like an upstander. And so we developed this upstander training where we did a little skit where, a woman is getting interrupted in a meeting or ideas are being taken, and then we would practice actually standing up and saying, "Hey, I think actually Susan wasn't done with what she was saying," like, or that was a great idea, but I think Susan mentioned that like 5 minutes ago. So I think it really takes some practice to be the one who actually does speak up in the room, and a way to do that that doesn't sort of really defame the other person. So one of the tricks that we taught in the program was to assume best intentions, but to name it. To say like, "Hey Tammy, I'm sure you probably didn't mean this, but I think you interrupted Susan." So, like, so Susan, can you take a chance and go ahead and say what you had to say? So again, there are ways to do it, to speak up when we feel nervous to speak up, that are little tricks, that allow us to set the culture we want. Because ultimately, we shape the culture when we allow or don't allow things to happen in meetings.
Kia, someone has written in, I think, a difficult question here that may be on many listeners' minds. What if my manager or boss is simply not emotionally intelligent at all? How do I deal with that as the person I'm reporting into?
Yeah, I think that's a really key one, and I hear it a lot from folks. I think first and foremost to note that no one has zero emotional intelligence, right? Unless you're like a psychopath, right? So everyone has some, and maybe there's it's not developed yet. It is a practice that can be developed. Um, I think the first is to actually go through the four domains yourself. So on a self-awareness aspect, how is your boss's lack of emotional intelligence affecting you? And just getting clear about that. Oh, it's impacting me in these ways. The second is back in your own sense of control and self-management. How can I manage my own reactions? Can I just kind of give myself a little space here? Can I be clear that it's not personal? And then getting to the relationship management side, do I have enough trust with this person to build feedback, to give that person feedback, right? So if you feel like you're built enough trust with your boss, you could come to your boss and say, "Hey, I know you may not mean this, but in the last meeting, this was said, and I think this is the reaction that some people had. What do you think? Because I really care about your success, and I think this might be getting in the way." So, you have to gauge whether you have enough trust with your manager or your boss and able to be able to do that. But if you do, and you come from a place of wanting them to succeed, it's sort of like, if I showed up and there was like food in my teeth, I'd want you to let me know. A good boss hopefully would want to know if they were doing things that were getting in the way.
And you have a saying, Kia, that we can train and build capacity to be quote unquote a Jedi in the room. And I'd love to hear more about that. And do you think that anybody, no matter what their position is in the room, can function like a Jedi? Like I'm the assistant to the assistant to the assistant, and I just started. Can I still be a Jedi in the room?
I think so. I think what we're talking about is sort of Jedi-like skills, right? I remember in one scene in Star Wars, um, I think it was Qui-Gon Jinn who said something like, "I sense an unusual amount of fear in the room for something as trivial as this trade dispute," right? So that it's that sense that things are happening beneath the surface, that I'm noticing. So the first is to notice those things, and even if you're not high on the food chain in the organization, maybe bringing a little bit of levity, to the situation, scanning the room, noticing when someone gets interrupted or their ideas are not being listened to actually call out to that person, "Hey, I think you had a great idea," right? So there are ways that you can actually be the Jedi in the room without having a lot of formal power. Like you're not the boss, but you can sense what's happening and try to make it go in a positive direction.
It's also interesting, and I'd love to hear your view of this, is building cultures that support people speaking up. So, for example, in our leadership team meetings for a long time, and this came from a consultant who worked with us, he said, ask a question, Tami, what's under the table? And give everybody a chance to answer. What's under the table right now as a leadership team? That sounds true. And I was like, oh my God, this is my favorite question ever. I really want people to share about what's under the table. And what I found is that some people did, but other people were like, hand over mouth, like, no
Yeah.
way, I'm not gonna, no way, I don't feel safe. So I reported back to the consultant, look, I love this question, but I've got many members of our team who are, their mouths are zipped. They do not feel safe. What can I do? And what he shared with me was, well, you can offer a courageous feedback award and
Mhm.
start acknowledging the people who give courageous feedback in the meeting. And
Yep.
I'm going to be honest with you, I did that. And I always acknowledged courageous feedback, even when it came as direct criticisms of me or difficult questions.
Yep.
And this gets to my question, Kia, certain people still did not feel safe
Yep.
to share what they saw as the shadow material in the
Yep.
organization. I could see that they were carrying something and they were keeping their mouths shut. And I
Yep.
don't know what I could have done to create more safety. What do you think about that and what organizations can do?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting and true for a lot of organizations. I mean, this is really in the realm of psychological safety, the concept of psychological safety, which comes from Amy Edmondson's work. What's interesting is her original work was done in hospitals. She calls psychological safety essentially permission for candor. Like, do we have permission to be real here? And the truth of most organizations is that they don't. So in her research, it was originally done in hospitals. And they studied the teams that had the lowest amount of sort of medical errors. And it turns out in those teams that really had few medical errors, they had this experience where even the nurses could speak up and say, "Hey, doctor, we're actually operating on the right foot, not the left foot today," right? Like they were able to speak up and say what needed to be said. It turns out psychological safety is super important for innovation. So, along with just hearing about the shadow side of things, it's also a place to hear about crazy ideas that could become excellent. So, um, for folks who don't feel a lot of psychological safety, I think it's oftentimes because they've experienced a lot of workplaces where there hasn't been, right? So, they've been burned so many times when they w were able to speak up and it didn't go well. So I think the fact that you're modeling that people can confront you directly and things still be okay, that you appreciate it can help. But different people have different levels of comfort with that. And maybe that's okay. Maybe you offer them other ways that aren't so public to talk to you, whether it's anonymous, whether it's one-on-one, but to be able to speak up in a room, to say something difficult, it actually takes a lot of psychological safety. A lot of organizations don't have that, and I think offering multiple ways for people to give you feedback can really help.
Yeah, all these domains of emotional intelligence are what we'll be training people in the Inner MBA, plus a lot more. We'll be offering people teachings and practices, cohort learning, coaching, one-on-one coaching about clarifying our sense of purpose and what's ours to do, managing our nervous system, having difficult conversations, and more. And before we end, I want to hear from you personally why this all matters so much, why
Hmm.
this is part of your personal mandate, if you will, to bring these skills to as many people as possible.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I mean, the Inner MBA course is so exciting because we've got all these great teachers really helping us talk about some of these intangible things that aren't taught in school or in MBA programs often. And so I think for me, what's so important about this is that we spend so much of our time at work. And to me, there's just so much unnecessary suffering at work. And it's sort of my mission to reduce that. And because it turns out that these are the skills that are really going to matter in a world of AI. These human skills of being able to connect, being able to repair relationships, being able to appreciate people, show some kindness, manage yourself and your emotions. These are the things that are going to really differentiate us in great workplaces. And so it's really important to me that people learn these skills. And I think to do this in a cohort-based way in the Inner MBA program is a great way to do it.
And I'm so happy that Sounds True is in consultation with you and Emiliana and the great team at the Greater Good Science Center to be helping us inform the training with the research that you've done. Kia Afcari, who's part of the core faculty of our Inner MBA program, along with Jeremy Hunter, who teaches at the Peter F. Drucker School of Management. We have Raj Sisodia, who is the co-founder of the Conscious Capitalism movement. Dick Schwartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems, will be bringing to us a teaching module on how we lead with self-energy at work and include all of our parts. Chip Conley, who is a successful entrepreneur several times over, and now the founder of the Modern Elder Academy. Melissa Bernstein, who's our entrepreneur in residence. She created the company Melissa and Doug Toys, and now a new company called Lifelines. And dare I say, more and more. We start on October 23rd at the International House in Berkeley. That's a live 3-day event that will also be live streamed for participants who can't join us in person. And then it's 6 months. People have asked, well, what kind of time commitment is it? It's 60 to 90 minutes of teaching each week. And then that's 3 weeks each month. And then we take a week for integration, plus one-on-one coaching and cohort learning and community, where we have a chance to share our challenges and share our discoveries and practice these skills in real time with each other. You can learn more at innermba.soundstrue.com. Kia, before I let you go, when do you introduce the surprise dance party with groups? Like, when does that happen? Like, what's at what moment?
I often like to start with it just to break the ice and say, hey, we're going to have a good time here, and I think we will in this program. So I'm really excited about all the speakers and faculty we have.
That's kind of like what they call it, the hidden goose egg or something like that. That we never know. I never know within the 6-month program when I'm gonna stand up and shake my thing. You never know when that's gonna happen.
That's right.
But I'm looking forward to it. Kia,
Right.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for really embodying also what you teach. I feel it from you. Feel it from your presence. You're leading with presence, and it's very palpable and contagious in a beautiful way. So
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much, Tami. Appreciate all the work you do.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being with us. Thanks for your good questions and comments.